The airport shuttle rumbled through the quiet streets of my hometown, and I stared out the window, tracing the familiar lights that now seemed smaller, dimmer. It had been 8 years since I'd left this place, 8 years since I'd slammed the door on the suffocating expectation that I should just be grateful for what my family decided I deserved. I tugged at the edge of my silk scarf, feeling the soft fabric against my skin, grounding me as the cityscape blurred past. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. A message from Dad. "Maddie, come home for New Year. We need to talk. Alone." My chest tightened, a familiar mix of dread and curiosity. I hadn't spoken to him in months, not really, and yet, here he was, summoning me. I closed my eyes for a moment, tasting the irony. The same man who told me I wasn't capable, the same man who left me to figure things out on my own, now wanted a conversation. Pulling my coat tighter, I imagined him in that dimly lit living room, a crumpled note on the table. "We use your money." The words made my stomach twist, both accusatory and absurd. I could feel the hum of the heater in my chest, the soft scratch of my boots on the tile floor as I stepped off the shuttle, a hesitant, deliberate step into a past I had carefully avoided. And yet I was ready. I had to be, because the woman who arrived at that door was not the girl who had left. I remember the night I finally walked out of that house like it was etched into my bones. I was 19, fresh out of college, clutching my acceptance letter for an internship in New York like it was a lifeline. My father had slammed his hand on the kitchen table, the veins on his neck pulsing as he shouted words that still made my throat tighten years later. "You're throwing everything away. You think you can make it on your own? Don't come crying to me when you fail." I stood frozen for a moment, feeling the lump rise in my throat, my hands trembling as I gripped the envelope tighter. My mother had looked down at her hands, silent as always, unwilling, or maybe too scared, to intervene. I could see the disappointment etched into every line of my father's face, and for a second, I felt the weight of every year I had struggled for his approval. It wasn't just anger. It was shame, a bruising mix that made me doubt myself for months afterward. But then I remembered my grandmother's words from years earlier, the ones she whispered when she caught me crying after a particularly brutal argument. "Maddie, the world will doubt you if you doubt yourself. Your wings are ready. Don't let anyone clip them." I clutched that memory like a talisman as I stepped outside, the cold air biting at my cheeks but somehow cleansing. I didn't look back. The smell of the winter night, faint pine from the trees lining the street, mingled with the urban chill, grounding me. That night, I packed a small suitcase, leaving behind the suffocating expectations, the notes, the passive-aggressive reminders that my success, or lack of it, was somehow their business. I promised myself that I would make it on my own, that I would never again rely on anyone who couldn't see my worth. The decision felt monumental, terrifying, and liberating all at once. As I walked to the bus station, I traced the edges of the note my father had left behind, the same one that would haunt me in years to come. "We use your money. Maybe that's all you're good for." It stung then, and it would sting later. But it also ignited something stubborn in me, a quiet, unyielding resolve. That night, I stepped into a world where failure was possible, yes, but independence was inevitable. And in that decision, I found the first fragile seeds of who I would become. New York was both terrifying and exhilarating. I arrived with nothing but a suitcase, my grandmother's words echoing in my mind, and a determination that refused to waver. The first few weeks were brutal, sleeping on a friend's couch, working 2 part-time jobs just to pay rent, and staring at my acceptance letter over and over, trying to convince myself that I belonged in the fast-paced world of fashion PR. Every rejection email felt like a punch to the gut, and every delayed paycheck reminded me that independence wasn't glamorous, it was relentless. Then I met her, Olivia Grant, a seasoned PR executive who saw more potential in me than I could see in myself. She hired me as an assistant, but within weeks, she was mentoring me, teaching me how to navigate high-stakes meetings, pitch clients with confidence, and present myself without apology. "Madeline," she said one afternoon, adjusting the lapel of her tailored blazer, "don't shrink. People are waiting for you to take up space. Take it. Her words were a bomb. Slowly, I began to find my rhythm. I learned to work long nights, balancing spreadsheets, client presentations, and endless networking events, all while pretending to be confident even when self-doubt gnawed at me like a persistent shadow. I celebrated the small wins silently. The first time a client complimented my campaign idea, the first profitable project I managed end-to-end, the first month I actually saved more than I spent. What I didn't tell anyone back home was that I was thriving. My father and stepmother assumed I was struggling, that I was barely scraping by. I posted safe, modest updates online, showing photos of coffee cups and city streets, nothing hinting at my growing independence, my expanding portfolio, or the savings that were quietly multiplying in a private account. By the second year, I had secured my first major client, a boutique fashion brand that turned my strategy into a city-wide sensation. I remember the thrill of seeing their billboards on Fifth Avenue, the same streets I had once wandered nervously, unsure if I even belonged in the city. I grinned, feeling a rush of vindication that I didn't need to shout. It was mine, and I had earned it. By year 5, I had co-founded my own boutique PR agency, a small but thriving firm with a handful of dedicated employees who believed in the vision I had nurtured in secret for years. The office smelled of fresh coffee, leather-bound notebooks, and subtle floral arrangements, details that reminded me daily that I had built something real, tangible, and entirely my own. Every time I walked through those doors, I felt the quiet pride of someone who had refused to be defined by the limitations others imposed. And all the while, my family remained oblivious. They thought the note I'd left behind, and the years of silence meant I was still struggling, still dependent, still vulnerable. They had no idea that the girl they dismissed had quietly become a woman they could no longer underestimate. I parked my car in the driveway of the house I had left 8 years ago, the familiar scent of pine and winter air hitting me immediately. The front door looked smaller than I remembered, the paint a little chipped, the doormat worn thin from years of use. But the memory of that note, "We use your money," still burned like a brand, and today, I wasn't here to be hurt. I was here to reclaim my story. Dad opened the door before I could knock, his face frozen in that same mixture of surprise and authority he always carried. "Maddie, you came," he said, voice tight, eyes flicking briefly toward the kitchen table where a folded note lay. I stepped inside, letting the door close behind me with a soft click. The familiar creak of the floorboards under my boots echoed like a drumbeat in the silence. "Yes," I said evenly, feeling the subtle power in my voice. "I came." He glanced nervously at the note, then back at me. We need to talk," he stammered, trying to regain composure, but I was already moving into the living room. The space felt smaller than I remembered, the furniture unchanged, stiff, conservative, practical, but my eyes lingered on details that didn't matter anymore. Then I set my bag down. Out came my portfolio, subtly hinting at the world I'd built. Glossy campaign images, media coverage, press releases from my boutique PR agency. I let him absorb the evidence before I said a word. "This," I began, spreading out the materials, "is what I've built since I left. On my own. Without anyone telling me I wasn't enough." My eyes met his, steady and unflinching. "The note you left about us using my money? That was wrong. And irrelevant. Because I didn't need your money. I built this myself." For a moment, silence reigned. His mouth opened, then closed. I watched as disbelief flickered in his eyes, quickly replaced by guilt and, finally, a faint spark of pride he didn't know how to voice. Mom hovered in the doorway, eyes wide, hand trembling slightly as she clutched the hem of her sweater. My stepmother, seated stiffly at the kitchen table, couldn't hide her shock, the color draining from her face as she took in the glossy success displayed so openly. "I own my agency," I continued, voice calm but firm. "We manage campaigns for clients you've probably seen in magazines. I handle 6 employees. I make 6 figures. And yes," I said, letting the words sink in, "I did it without any financial help from this house. Or from anyone here." The room felt heavy with their unspoken reactions, Dad's jaw tight, Mom's hands wringing, stepmom biting her lip. I let it linger, watching their assumptions crumble silently, the weight of years of underestimation finally lifting off my shoulders. Then I closed the portfolio. I didn't come here to punish you, I said, voice softening slightly. I came to show you the truth. The girl you doubted, the daughter you dismissed, isn't just surviving. She's thriving. And she's not going back to being underestimated again. For the first time in years, I saw the raw, unfiltered emotions on their faces: shame, disbelief, a flicker of admiration buried under guilt. And for the first time, I felt completely free. After the initial shock settled over them, I finally took a seat on the couch, the familiar cushions feeling strangely foreign beneath me. I looked around the living room, taking in the same walls I'd once felt trapped within, now seeing them as the stage for my triumph. I had the upper hand, and I intended to use it, not for revenge, but to rewrite the rules of engagement with my family. Here's the deal, I began, keeping my tone calm but firm. I'm willing to help, but on my terms. Not yours. Not the way it used to be. Dad's face tightened, Mom's hands stilled mid-fidget, and stepmom's expression shifted from shock to guarded curiosity. I'll start with you, Dad, I said, locking eyes with him. If you want to have a relationship with me moving forward, it needs to be based on respect, not judgment. That means no more undermining me, no more hurtful remarks about money or my choices. You need to acknowledge the effort I've put into my life. I'm not your bank account. I'm not your measure of pride. I am my own person. He swallowed hard, nodding slightly. I could see the internal struggle, pride battling shame, but I didn't flinch. Turning to Mom, I continued, You've spent years being passive, letting the tension grow, letting me feel like my opinions didn't matter. I need you to find your voice. Stand up for yourself, for me, for what's right in this family. Stepmom shifted in her seat, arms crossed. I softened my tone just slightly, letting a hint of compassion seep in. And you need to reflect on your priorities. Stop clinging to status and appearances at the cost of real relationships. You can still have your life, but it cannot be at the expense of everyone else. Learn to give rather than take. Then I laid out one last condition, one tied not just to their actions, but to healing. Every one of you needs to pursue something meaningful, something that defines you outside this house. Stop relying on what I might provide, or the image of me you think you understand.
Grow. Change.
Prove that this family can be more than judgment and expectation. I let my words hang in the room, heavy and deliberate, giving them time to absorb the full weight of the shift. For the first time, I was not the scared, obedient daughter who left quietly. I was a woman in control of her narrative, a woman who decided who she let into her life, and under what terms. Then I stood, smoothing my coat, feeling the confidence radiate in every movement. I care about you all, truly. But that care does not mean tolerance for old patterns. I'm here, but I am not bending. I am not shrinking. And that, finally, needs to be understood. They sat in silence, processing, their emotions raw, their assumptions shattered. And for the first time, I realized something profound. I wasn't just reclaiming my success. I was reclaiming my family, on my terms, in my power, and with my heart intact. The days that followed felt surreal. Conversations with my family, once fraught with tension and unspoken grievances, began to shift. Dad, awkward at first, started asking for advice, not as a superior, but as someone who finally recognized my perspective. He apologized quietly one evening, his voice low and sincere. I didn't understand before. I see it now, Maddie. I nodded, feeling a release I hadn't expected. Mom took her first small steps toward asserting herself, enrolling in a creative writing class she'd always wanted to try. Her eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen since childhood, and for the first time, I realized she too had been caged by expectations. Stepmom, hesitant at first, began volunteering at a local charity, learning that life offered more meaning than appearances or superficial control. I watched them grow and change, and I felt a profound sense of peace. It wasn't just about my accomplishments or the validation I could now claim, it was about seeing the people I loved finally learning to respect themselves and others. One evening, I found the small, folded note my grandmother had once given me tucked inside a drawer. I held it in my hands, its edges worn from years of keeping it close. "Your wings are ready. Don't let anyone clip them." I smiled softly, tracing the words with my fingertips. That same message had carried me through rejection, heartbreak, and struggle. Now, it reminded me that my journey wasn't just about proving others wrong. It was about embracing who I had become. I stood by the window, watching the snow fall gently over the familiar streets, the lights of my hometown twinkling like a constellation of memories and possibilities. The girl who left, trembling and uncertain, had grown into a woman who could face the past without fear and the future without hesitation. And in that quiet, reflective moment, I knew the truth. Strength wasn't measured by how loudly you proclaimed it, nor independence by how many walls you built. It was measured by the grace with which you held your power, the compassion you extended even when wronged, and the courage to define your life on your own terms. I whispered to the empty room, to the snow, to myself. I am enough. I am free. I am unbreakable. The new year dawned, and with it came the promise of a family learning to heal, and a woman finally living fully, strong, unapologetic, and radiant in the life she had earned.